Good evening. Welcome to another Mothman podcast. On tonight's episode, we're having part 3 of the Ghost of Chicago. So, sit back and enjoy yourself. And welcome to the Mothman podcast.
We're here in Clarendon Hills at the Country House Restaurant with one of the owners, Patrick Regnery. What experiences have you had here, Patrick?
I've had 3 distinct experiences, 2 having to do with the back door. And what made me believe that something odd was happening was especially the back door was a metal door. I've heard it slam 1,000 times. And these 2 times, the sound was exaggerated. Once my brother was here with me, he tried to recreate this sound by going back out and slamming a door. It just wasn't the same. It was like an echo when it happened. As I said, the sound was exaggerated. I've never heard anything like that before. The door was locked. It couldn't have happened by a person slamming the door.
So you blame the ghost?
Yeah, I certainly do. The other experience I had was an inside door, a fire door separating the kitchen from the dining room. That's a heavy door, fire door, meaning that it was built heavy so it would contain any kitchen fire. That's a solid core door that can't be moved by a gust of wind or anything like that. I was the only one in the building. The door swung open and swung shut. Again, the sound was exaggerated, as if it was in an echo chamber. It couldn't have happened by itself.
So you feel your restaurant is haunted?
Yes, I certainly do. And I don't blame anyone for being a skeptic about it. It just happens to happen to you. And then you become a believer really quickly after that.
I'm here with David Regnery, an owner of the Country House Restaurant. He's been here for some 12 years. David, how did you learn the place is haunted?
Oh, about 6 or 7 years ago, I came in one morning with one of the carpenters to help remodel it. We had some work to do in the kitchen. We came into the kitchen, spent about 5 minutes there, and then came into the bar area. It was a bright summer day out, and all the interior shutters were closed. We walked into the bar. I said, "Randy, what kind of a beer would you like?" And boom, 6 of the interior shutters went up by themselves. And it really startled me and startled him, and he thought I was pulling some sort of practical joke. Went over to investigate the shutters, and there were no wires, nothing. You know, that's the first time that I really noticed something was going on.
But many of your employees have had experiences.
Yeah, after that, other people began to notice doors opening by themselves. We had a local policeman who was going through a divorce, and he asked if he could stay in one of the empty rooms upstairs, which used to be an apartment. He did, and after about a week or so, he told me that he would hear footsteps going up and down the stairs and back of the bar, and a couple of times he literally got out of bed with his gun, and no one there. And he finally just slept through it. It didn't bother him after a while, but not every night, but once or twice a week, he'd hear the footsteps up and down.
Of course, one night I was out here with some psychics. We got here after a wedding reception in the area, and only when I got here did I decide it's a good chance to see if there's anything going on. So I sat the 2 women down at a table in the back, and I said, "This place is supposedly haunted. What do you think?" They soon came up with a story about a blonde, and they said that she was 28 years of age, and I believe they said it was 1958 that she died. They said that she was here, that she, in fact, was in love with a bartender, that she got into some kind of argument with him, that she ran out of the place, that she was very upset, in fact, had nothing to drink, left the place, got in a car, drove off, and that she had committed suicide within a mile or so of the place.
Yeah, I had never heard that story until they told me about it, and a few days later I called up the man that we bought the bar from, who's still in the Chicago area, and he said he confirmed everything. Actually, I think they said it happened in 1957, and he said, no, it happened in 1958, but they got the age
Just
proper.
1 year off, though.
Yeah, he remembers it very well because he was sued under the Dram Shop Act, and he was totally exonerated because she hadn't had anything to drink that day, but her death occurred within a half a mile of the building.
And there are some, though, who think they've seen the blonde here.
Yeah, one day I was talking to the hostess at the hostess counter, and a couple came in, And the man jokingly asked me, Trudy, what do you have upstairs, some sort of bordello? And I said, no, not really, why? And he said, well, as I came in, my wife and myself saw a blonde woman up in one of your windows kind of beckoning us in. And so I went up to the room that he was talking about, and the door was locked. It was a storeroom at that time. It's an office now. But anyway, the door was locked. I unlocked it, looked in the room, nothing there, and went into the kitchen and asked if anybody came down the kitchen stairs. There's only 2 staircases in the building, 2 ways down from upstairs. Nobody saw a thing. Nobody saw a thing.
So that seems to be the ghost of the country house.
Yeah, it does. It does. It would be quite a coincidence if it wasn't. But we've had experiences again and again and again. For instance, I was sitting at this table one night about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and we close at latest at 2 on weekends, and I can't remember if it was a weekend or not. But anyway, I was sitting with one of the girls that worked here. We were going over some menu changes, and the place had literally been deserted for an hour or 2 hours. And all of a sudden, the jukebox went on, and that really startled the hell out of us. We both left very, very quickly. I called the jukebox people the next day, and they said, impossible, it can't happen. If it was off for X amount of hours, it's not going to just go on by itself.
So it's almost typical poltergeist mischievous activity.
Oh, yeah. Doors open and slam that are locked, exit doors. I've heard a baby crying upstairs. One of the waitresses, 2 months ago, heard the same thing. We've had cleaning crew in here. They come in every day about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and one heard a woman crying all night. He thought it was a radio and find out there wasn't a radio on, and he wouldn't come back afterwards.
But it doesn't affect trade, doesn't affect the restaurant.
No, it doesn't. Some people are very curious about it, but really very few of the customers, aside from the man and his wife, have really heard anything, because during business hours it's very noisy in here, and you really wouldn't notice anything unless you were staring at a door that suddenly opened and there was nobody there. But it doesn't really seem to be active during business hours. It's usually late at night.
It'd be hard to tell anyway.
Yeah, it would.
Accidental death or deliberate death, the incident apparently produced a ghost.
Fritz Kruppen is a manager here at the Country House. He's been coming out here for many years as well. He had an experience recently. What happened?
David, the owner, myself, and Lynn, the bartender, were sitting at table 10 in the corner. We're all quite accustomed to the sounds when this place closed, and all of a sudden, we heard someone walking, what we thought was walking upstairs, and the hair on Lynn's head stood up and said, I want to go. Get me out of here. Walk me to the car. So I walked her to the car and got her going. David and I came back and sat down and talked about what we had just heard. And he said, well, Fritz, you finally heard the ghost. Which is, I said, well, I was always kind of a non-believer, but I'm still not sure. Then the sound came again, which is my hair stood on end, which is, and to tell you the truth, I thought it was all a bunch of hokum before, but you would have had to have been there to hear the sound, again, which was no other sound that's come from this place before.
So after 2 experiences in one night, you're now a believer?
Yes, I am, very much so.
Mary Alice Quinn was a little Irish-American girl born on the south side of Chicago in 1920. Born with a heart condition, she would spend much of her life in bed and at rest. During that time, she would spend hours in prayer to her favorite saint, St. Therese, the European mystic. Mary Alice would die at the age of 14 and be buried here at Holy Sepulchre Cemetery. She would become famous not for what she accomplished during her short life, but the miracles and supernatural things that would occur after her death. This is the grave of the Chicago Miracle Child. Shortly after the burial of Mary Alice here, reports began to filter back to the Quinn family. People said that the apparition of the little girl had appeared to them, curing them of their various illnesses. These reports would soon stop. Taking the place of reports of an apparition was a psychic scent of roses, a sign that Mary Alice was somewhere nearby. That psychic scent often occurs here at the graveside. It's occurred to me a number of times. A strong scent of roses when there are no physical roses present. In fact, there are no roses here today, only some artificial roses. Other flowers grow here, and also you'll find around the grave quite often plastic crosses, rosary beads, holy cards, all signs, all offerings left by the thousands of pilgrims who come here every year looking for the intercession of Mary Alice. Mary Alice's mother during the 1940s and 1950s would often lecture at various grammar schools and high schools in the Chicagoland area. When she would do that, she would provide people in attendance with a special relic. This is a picture of Mary Alice, and stapled to the bottom is a piece of yellow cloth. This is a first-class relic, a piece of cloth that came from a dress that Mary Alice wore during her short life. Today, these are no longer being distributed, but a relic that many people have from the grave is a pinch of dirt. Taking a pinch of dirt from the grave of Mary Alice is an old Irish custom. It happens here quite often, and many believe that by taking dirt from the grave, they have some way of getting in touch with the Chicago miracle child. The Castle Pub on Chicago's North Side is the only Scottish pub in the city. It opened in 1961 when Jane McDougall transformed a local neighborhood bar into a Scottish pub, complete with tartan carpet on the floor and Scottish memorabilia along the walls. Jane bought a former shot and beer bar and changed things. One thing would remain the same, however: the former owner, who died here in the bar in 1959. He's still here, he's still present, and he's been observed by many over the years. Jane discovered this fact shortly after opening up. She found out that vodka would disappear from open bottles in the bar at night. She'd even mark some of the bottles with a piece of crayon at the level of vodka, only to come back the next day to find out that during the night, when there was nobody present, the level of vodka would continue to drop lower and lower. Jane McDougall has had nothing but trouble keeping bartenders on the job. They just don't seem to want to work here, along with the Ghost. One of her first bartenders was Al, who also would drink vodka like Frank. One night, Al poured himself a shot of vodka, left it on the bar, went down to the basement to get some cases of beer. When he brought the beer back up, the shot glass was empty. Al knew he hadn't drunk the vodka, but he wasn't quite sure. He poured himself one more shot, wrote a note: Al did not drink this vodka, and left it there. He went back in the basement, came back up with more beer. There he found the shot glass empty with that note nearby. Al quit at that point. Another bartender, David, had trouble with the coolers. The cooler doors would open and jugs of wine jump out and hit him in the foot on more than one occasion. One bartender was brought over from Scotland. His name was Billy. He came from Scotland, worked here a while, got nervous with the Ghost, went back home. He got up enough nerve to come back from Scotland one more time. He was here alone one night when he heard a voice behind him say, "I'll take a shot of vodka on the rocks." He turned around. There was nobody in the bar. He was on the front step at closing time for Jane McDougall to come and lock up. He quit at that point. This is the exact spot where Frank Giff, former owner of this bar, drank himself to death in 1959. Of course, things looked different back then. There was no booth here, and a bar ran down in front of us along the side of the wall. Frank was behind the bar, fell backwards, struck his head against this wall, and died. So we are precisely at the spot where he breathed his last and where all sorts of things have happened. Linda Barcelo here has had an experience recently here at the bar. What happened?
Well, I came in one night, and I had on a dress, and I felt a coldness coming up the back of my legs. And I was watching the door, and I would feel cold again, but it would be my calves, the part that was exposed, and I never felt the cold again. It was only happened in one certain spot, and I could feel some kind of like presence in that certain spot.
So you felt this was not of this world?
No, there was something different about that spot.
The ghost of Frank apparently makes himself known particularly to women with red hair. Frank's widow, Edna, had red hair. And a coldness, cold spots here at the spot where Frank died, or even a cold, clammy hand on occasion, has been experienced by many women. Linda, of course, is a redhead, so I think she fits that category quite well.
The Castle Pub is named after the famous Edinburgh Castle in Scotland. The original castle is definitely haunted. Its Chicago namesake is living up to its reputation.
The Robinson family burial ground is a genuine Indian burial ground here in the city limits of Chicago. Alexander Robinson, also known as Chief Chichipinque, his wife, Catherine Chevalier Robinson, and their clan lived, died, and were buried here in the early pioneer days. Alexander Robinson himself was a hero of the Fort Dearborn Massacre. During that time, he helped to save American settlers and was given a tract of land along the Des Plaines River near current O'Hare Airport in gratitude. Indian burial grounds have traditionally been considered good places for hauntings. Robinson Woods is no exception. Here in the woods at night, strange lights, strange sounds have been seen and observed. Now, by the two trees behind me, in that area, Indian tom-tom sounds were recorded. Caught on tape by two psychic researchers some years ago, no explanation is possible. There were no Indians or Indian tom-toms present in the woods that night, at least not physically. And here in the boulder in front of me, a strange light was caught on film. A ball of light above the name Alexander on that boulder showed up as a silver dollar-sized looking ball of light. The light was caught on infrared film. Nothing was wrong with the camera, nothing wrong with the film. With the aid of that infrared, we captured what appears to be a ghost light. There are many stories of people seeing ghost lights by night. This photograph was taken by day, so apparently the ghosts are still here during the daylight hours, only we can't see them with our human eyes. In front of the monument erected to the memory of Alexander Robinson, we often find flowers left behind as offerings. Sometimes feathers or other strange artifacts, and nearby is always broken glass, from wine bottles, beer bottles, pop tops of beer cans, debris of that sort, left behind by neighbors who come out here in the woods to drink by night. Now, they have a very curious custom that they go through. They always spill some of the contents of the first can, the first bottle, on top of the ground, on top of the graves. I've asked them why they've done it. They said they've always done it that way. It's an old tradition. Now, that's an old Indian custom, to spill some of your first can, your first bottle on the top of the ground as an offering to the spirits, to the ancestors who've passed on before. And maybe that's one reason why the ghosts are still here in the woods by night. You see, some of the Robinson clan were known to be alcoholics. So maybe, with that booze percolating down to the grave 6 feet below our feet, they might be earthbound for some time rather than move on to the happy hunting ground. I had a very real psychic experience out here at Robinson Woods, November the 2nd of 1980. That's 2 days after Halloween, All Souls Day. I was leading a tour to the area. We got off the bus, walked back in the area around the spot where Alexander Robinson lays buried. As we stood there, suddenly those with me remarked that there was a scent of violets in the air. There were no flowers in bloom, there were no cut flowers to be found. Those with me began to search the area. When they couldn't find a natural explanation, they decided to create one. They soon singled out one girl in the group, and they said, "It's you. You're wearing cheap perfume. You're the cause of all this." That poor girl went back to the bus in tears. When I apologized to her later, there was no scent of violets around her. She was not the cause. What could the scent of violets mean? Traditionally, a scent of violets or roses is said to mean spirits are nearby trying to make contact. And what better day to have this happen than on All Souls Day, 2 days after Halloween, a day when the dead are said to be able to come through easier to those the living on this side. Even in photography, ghosts have been caught on film. The ghosts are very rarely seen with the human eye, but they're caught on film that is developed later. Amateurs capture ghosts very often, and on rare occasions, a professional photographer is involved. During a routine photo shoot in a Northside Chicago cemetery on Clark Street back in the summer of 1982, a professional photographer and his model embarked on a very special adventure. They captured ghosts on film. The most remarkable example of ghosts caught on film that I've seen around the Chicagoland area was the photograph taken by Jim Henderson and his model, Ladine. Ladine, what do you remember about that day?
Well, we came out here one day for what I thought was going to be a normal, regular shooting, and I started to feel very strange walking around, like somebody was watching me, and when we got the pictures back, apparently somebody had been watching me.
Jim, what was on the pictures?
Well, the picture had a, we say a weird effect to it. The parts of Ladine's body, such as her neck, her arm, and her leg, were glowing. And then also the head or face of an individual who I'm not able to identify, showing over her shoulder. This is we did not use any unusual lights that day or filters, and I'm just very surprised that we got the result we did. I don't have any explanation for it, but I was very pleased with the result.
Now, you've been a photographer for 14 years now.
That's right.
And have you ever seen anything like this before?
No, I have not.
So what do you make of it?
Well, as I said before, it's a little hard to explain, but it does make for a very interesting Photoshop. So I have some friends that have doubted it, but like I say, we did not touch it up in any way.
So you think it's something of the other world?
That's possible, I couldn't say.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is 2122 North Clark Street. It was formerly the home of the SMC Cartage Company, and in the garage here, members of the Bugs Moran gang would meet back in the 1920s. Al Capone wanted to consolidate total control over bootlegging in Chicago, and so it was here that the infamous St. Valentine's Day Massacre would take place February the 14th of 1929. Capone had his henchmen, disguised as police and plainclothes detectives, come here on a mock police raid. They tricked the Moran men into thinking it was a routine police raid. They lined up against the back wall of the building and were shot down. 6 men dead instantly. The 7th man would die hours later in nearby Alexian Brothers Hospital. This site has been sought out by curiosity seekers and tourists ever since. When the garage still stood here, all sorts of people came and asked to be let in the back room. They wanted to go there and stick their fingers in the bullet-pocked holes of the wall. They were told, no way, go away, we're not allowed in. In 1967, things would change. That's when the garage would be torn down with other buildings in this block so that the housing project behind me could be constructed. With the garage down, now you can walk right over the area. In fact, you can stand just about where the men died, marked by this tree. This is about the north wall site of this lot. Here along an axis parallel with this tree is where the men were shot down. And right around here, people began to talk about hearing strange sobbing and moaning sounds. At first, they thought maybe they were ghosts, but on second thought, it was just the imagination of those who were here. After all, if you had read too much about what had happened, heard too much about what had happened, maybe that was the explanation. But then it was noticed that animals act up here also. People walking their dogs in the area have had the dogs stare, growl, pull at the leashes, observe something taking place that those walking the animals can't see, can't observe. No one could accuse the dogs of having vivid imaginations. The animal testimony, as well as the human, points to some very strange activity taking place here, hauntings, ghosts, at the site of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. I'm standing just next to the wall of the building, just south of the massacre site. It was against a wall just like this that the men were lined up against and shot back in 1929. When the garage was torn down back in 1967, bricks were highly prized souvenirs. Everybody in the area wanted a brick that came from the garage. A brick that came from the wall was better, and a brick with bullet holes was better yet, but any souvenir of that massacre would do. Now, a lot of people in the area still own bricks, but the largest number were sent to Canada to a British Vancouver millionaire. He used those bricks in a very tacky fashion, however. He lined the men's washroom wall of his banjo bar with those bricks. He soon found his banjo bar closed. Bricks were placed in storage. They now are offered for sale from time to time. He suffered bad luck from those bricks. Many Chicagoans feel that bricks from the St. Valentine's Day Massacre wall contain within them some sort of a jinx, some kind of a curse because of what happened here years before. Many people wouldn't own one for anything. Could a relic of a tragedy that took place years before contain within it some essence of that disaster, of that horrible day? That's what many people feel around Chicago, and some people I know who've had bricks have since gotten rid of them. They want no more part of them.
We can only speculate where those hundreds of jinx bricks from that massacre wall may be today.
Mount Carmel Cemetery in West Suburban Hillside contains hundreds of graves of people like Jaime Weiss, Frank Diddy, and Scarface Al Capone. This is the grave of Al Capone, the godfather of an immense bootlegging empire created back in the days of Prohibition. Al died in 1947 at the age of 48, quite a young man. To this day, people still come and plant flowers at his grave. Al lies buried next to his mother. He was his mother's pet in life, and the only son given the honor of lying next to her in death. Is the grave of Al Capone haunted? There are many who would like to think so. I have no hard evidence about that, but I did make an interesting discovery November 1, 1980, the day after Halloween. I was leading a tour here, walked off the coach, came to the spot, stood here, and found a case of beer on top of Al's grave. 2 cans were missing. I later found the empties in the hedges. All the other cans were full. It was obvious that someone had been here the night before. The dew on the case showed that, and they were frightened away by something so terrifying and left in such haste The case of beer was still there the next day. I can assure you that local police or the cemetery workers would not have left that case behind. I took it home.
Thank you for listening to another Mothman podcast. That was the end of the Ghost of Chicago. So if you're ever in Chicago, now you have a list of sightings that you need to go visit. So until I see you again on the podcast, have a good day and good evening. The Mothman.